everybody, welcome back. You are listening to Joygasm, a video game and movie podcast. I'm Russ, Xbox Live Toaster 360. You all know him, that's right, he's Steve, Xbox Live Stevavitch. And we wish everyone a Merry Christmas on episode 205 today to December 26th, 2020. It's going to be the last time, actually, I get to say 2020 in that voice like Barbara Walters, because I think the next episode we're going to be officially into 2021. But I also wanted to welcome back our good old friend Brad, who has been joining us for this particular episode, which we are going to get into right away. The topic of the day is our favorite games of 2020. I had to say it one more last time. This is fantastic. But Brad, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Russ. I appreciate you having me.
I'm always curious at this time of year to find out what your current Xbox gamer score is, because we did this last year, and I think you said it was somewhere like around 238,000. Is that right?
Russ, I had breakfast about an hour ago, and I can't remember what I had for breakfast an hour ago. I have no idea what I was a year ago at this point.
It's amazing to me, though.
That sounds high because right now I'm only at 225.
Maybe you just broke 200 or something, because you had set a goal for yourself last year. Remember that?
That was 2 years ago. My goal was 200, and I hit it right at the end of the year. Last year, end of 2019, probably around 215. I didn't put a ton on this year because, frankly, there weren't a lot of new Xbox games to play in 2020. So it was, hitting some old stuff and then spending a lot of time on other consoles, as we'll jump in here. But up till the end of the year, man, there just wasn't a whole lot of Microsoft love in my game room here.
Well, even in the previous years, though, I think it's particularly impressive that you were, like, for instance, that one year that you made it a goal to reach 200,000 with your gamer score. You were not, if I remember correctly, exclusively playing only Xbox titles that year. You were still playing games for the Switch and for the PS4, and I don't know if you were playing any PC titles or not, but you were still churning out the titles.
It's cool, Russ. You can call me a console whore. That's fine. So yeah, I absolutely bounce between all of the different systems. I've never been exclusive. I am as a fellow
gaming whore.
Exactly.
I've got to tell you that's where the respect comes in. Bradley, is I'm like, how does he do it? How?
Well, at the time, it really helped that I had a job that I could get done in about 25 or 30 hours a week. So I had a ton of time to play video games, but that isn't necessarily my life right now, but that's okay. But no, finishing out 2020, I am sitting at about 225,000 gamer score. I'll probably put a few more points on between now and New Year's, still spending some time on Valhalla. But yeah, that's where I'm going to finish out the year.
Fantastic. Well, Steve, normally I would say what's new with you, but we're going to jump right in because there's a lot of stuff to go through, which I for one, I'm looking forward to this type of episode at the end of each year is special to me because it's one of the few episodes where we just geek out over the stuff we have already experienced and played. It's a reflection point where normally in this program, we tend to talk about bleeding edge stuff that's either coming out soon or has just been released. So it's nice to be able to take a moment and look back. But what we're going to do is we have each selected our top 5 games of 2020. We're going to make our way starting with number 5, doing the whole round robin thing. So Bradley, since he is our special guest, he will go first, followed by Steve, and then I will finish it. And we'll just go from number 5 all the way up to what our number 1 favorite title of 2020 is. And during that time, it's going to be great to be able to have a brief description of why said game for every number got selected. So, Bradley, please, what is your number 5 pick?
So, my number 5 pick for the year on favorite games is a Switch title Animal Crossing New Horizon. So that took my 5 spot. So I think that's the only game I'm going to have on my list that Russ has touched. And Steve, like I mentioned pre-show, I don't think I'm going to have a single title that you've played, but maybe you'll
Fantastic.
So Animal Crossing, it was, Nintendo didn't do anything crazy with it. They just made another Animal Crossing game. Came out in mid-March, which was perfect timing because this was a perfect pandemic title.
Yeah.
It was, it hit at the right time, kind of a brainless while we were all on our first lockdown, sitting at home, building out my village and having a good time with it. My kids were playing it. I had a couple other friends playing it. So just a good social experience, going and visiting other people's islands and, doing the daily tasks and building it out, building something out that wasn't infected with COVID. So it hit at the right time. Casual game, but I probably put close to 100 hours in on it throughout the course of the year. So it came in as my number 5 favorite game of the year.
I have to say that was almost my number 5 pick. And I think that you were spot on in that title could not have been released at a better time just because there was so much that the world was dealing with. The negativity, a lot of the psychological ramifications that people have been wrestling with, and I don't know, like it was such a breath of fresh air to be able to play a game that it was a return to basics in terms of how life could be or should be. And I respect that selection for sure.
Well, thank you. That's why I came on, is for your respect, Russ. So I appreciate that.
It doesn't amount for much, but it's there.
There we go.
Steve,
no, there you go.
What is your number 5?
My number 5 actually was probably my hardest choice because I was choosing based on, well, actually all of my 5 were based on how I like the environment, how much I was thinking about it during the day, couldn't wait to jump back in, sort of thing. And what really ruled out number 5 versus our runner-up. I'll just tell you what it is. So my runner-up.
I like the lead-in, by the way.
Thank you. Okay,
don't sell yourself short, Steve.
Yeah, right.
I have bated breath.
So let me just tell you what my runner-up was, because I feel almost guilty not putting on the list. But my runner-up was Rogue Squadron, Star Wars Rogue Squadron.
Okay.
Star Wars Squadrons?
Yeah.
Yep.
And so why that didn't make the list is because, I feel like I didn't get the optimal experience playing the game. I loved what I played. I thought that, a space, spaceship shooter, and the Star Wars environment with beautiful backgrounds. It just had really the list of what I wanted a spaceship shooter to be. But it just didn't feel like, because I didn't have the optimal setup with the VR and a high-end CPU, I couldn't delve into it as deep as I wanted to, and I really felt hindered playing the game, and I didn't have that I really can't wait to go play this game again feeling like I had actually for what I chose for number 5, which I kept on coming back and playing and playing and playing. I wasn't diehard with it, but I definitely loved the game, which was Legends of Runeterra.
Oh, Legends of Runeterra, number 5.
So I found myself talking about the game a lot more with my buddies and my colleagues, and got them starting to play it. And I really couldn't fault the game for what it was. And I'm not a big card, type, player for this stuff. So this is really kind of my first entry into to that type of game. I've dabbled in it here or there, but it wasn't even that long. It was either going to be a hit or it was going to be a miss or whatever. But I really couldn't fault the game for what they did. The animations were awesome, and the voices were great. All the cards had personalities, and the emotes were cool. It was really hard, really difficult to fault the game. And although I didn't spend hours upon hours upon hours upon playing it, I did throughout my week go, man, I gotta jump back into Legends of Runeterra. I gotta make sure to get my loot chest. I want to get the new cards, maybe try a different strategy. And so because I couldn't get it out of my head week after week after week, that made my number 5.
I love how you very sneakily talked about 2 titles in that one thing there, Steve. kudos to you, good sir.
Indeed.
I was like, where's he going with this? He's talking about Star Wars Squadrons, but that's not his number 5 pick. What is it? Very nice. Very nice.
I didn't know we were doing runner-up. I would have talked about Ghost of Tsushima, which was my runner-up at number 6. But anyway.
Wait, I didn't hear that. Which one was your runner-up there, Brad?
Ghost of Tsushima, which I'm sure we're going to talk about at some point in the near future here.
I think your instincts serve you well. Okay, so I guess it's my turn. Number 5 for me. Okay. This is a title that I had been looking forward to getting released because I had played the first version of this. Well, it's not really a version. It's just the first game. This is the sequel. And that is Ori and the Will of the Wisps. I really thought that the first title was groundbreaking in the sense that it, by and large, is more of a traditional side-scrolling platformer. But they were making these decisions that actually made it a very compelling title. And with the sequel in mind, the soundtrack itself was fantastic. I loved the music, very sweeping ensemble of orchestral sounds. It was so good, I ended up buying the soundtrack on my iPhone, actually, and I listened to it here and there. The art direction itself, it's almost like Blizzard Entertainment were to make a side-scroller, because there are certain sensibilities with the art direction that is reminiscent of like what you would see in like a StarCraft title or a Diablo title. And it makes sense because there are folks in lead positions at the company that used to work at Blizzard. So it's amazing how those things coincide. However, the 2.5D side-scroller itself was a major departure from the stuff that you tend to see at Blizzard. And I, for one, am a sucker for that. I've always appreciated a really well thought out 2.5D side-scroller. The boss fights in the game harken back to a lot of the more old school 8-bit, 16-bit style bosses that you'd come across. But of course, this is on a current gen version, so there's a lot more bells and whistles to be found and appreciated. The other thing too is that it is a long action title, and I think it's worth noting that the studio itself, I believe it's High Moon Studios, they work from home all over the world before coronavirus was a thing. So this title has been in development for multiple years, but they completely supported this idea where everybody worked from home on the title 100% of the time. And I think there were only like 2, maybe 3 times during the year when the team got together. They would pick a location somewhere in the world, and then they'd hang out for like a week or 2 just to have that in-person camaraderie, being able to talk about different ideas for the game, and essentially have kind of like a team building party kind of thing. And then everybody would go back home and keep working on the game. It's a strong testament to what can happen if you've got a great team working on any given product. So I figured I would throw that in there. Bradley, number 4 for you.
So before I jump in on my number 4, I have to ask, Russ, have you tried Ori on your Xbox Series X, and have you noticed much of a difference?
So okay. This is it's kind of a curveball answer here. I briefly checked out Ori on my Xbox Series X, but on my 1080p TV. Since that time, I have now hooked up my Xbox Series X to one of my 4K computer monitors, but I have not had a chance. I was going to do it this morning and didn't get a chance to do it because I wanted to see it. But I'm very much looking forward to seeing like the crazy high frame rate along with the bumped up visuals, because that is a game. I'm glad you brought that up. I recall from E3, I think, how they were pushing the idea that game is getting a facelift. Yeah, I would love to see that. And I played it on the One X. I have not played it on my Series X, but I would love to load that up, and I may do that sometime this weekend and just see the HDR. I would think the colors in that game would just absolutely pop with with a good screen and HDR on there. Yeah. What were you going to say there, Steve? Look, I couldn't tell if you're doing sit-ups or if you're leaning toward the mic.
Well, I was going to say, it's not that important, but when I was shopping at Best Buy, not sponsored by Best Buy, they didn't have a Series X hooked up playing it, but they had video footage of the Series X playing it. And yes, I felt like a mosquito drawn to the flame. It was absolutely gorgeous.
It really is. The game itself, I made it all the way through. I think I need to double check this, but I want to say I have about 98% of the entire game discovered, which is saying something because the game is reminiscent of like a Super Metroid, for example, where you could see there are certain places that clearly are explorable, but because you don't have certain skills unlocked, you have to go back and return at different times and that sort of thing. So, Brad, did you end up beating that title?
No, I suck at video games, so I never finished.
That is not true.
No, I don't know what happened on that. I probably put 5 or 10 hours in on Will of the Wisps. I was in Will of the Wisps. Wow, that is a mouthful. I was enjoying it. And something else must have come out because I just stopped playing it. So I'll have to go back, and that is one I would like to check out and kind of wrap up. But anyway, no, great games, both the first and the second one. Very well done, beautifully hand-drawn, tremendous visuals and audio. So yeah, great titles. I approve of your number 5, Russ. I know that's why you invited me, is for approval.
Oh, thank you. I need that.
So, all right, I'll get us back on track. My number 4 title of the year is the first PS5 game that I played, Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales. Picked that up with the launch PS5 that I've got in the game room here. I absolutely adored that game. It is a perfect 9-10 hour title, good bite size, not a 40-hour open world game. There's way too many of those that have come out recently. But I love the character of Miles Morales. I love the way you can kind of turn the game into the Spider-Verse. I mean, they've got the costume and everything, the suit and everything. And the story is solid. It's tight, and that's something that happens with a 9-hour game as opposed to a 40-hour game. There's not a lot of fat to it, so you're constantly being pulled forward with what's going to happen next in the story. I absolutely loved that. That's actually one of the only games that I've started on New Game Plus in many years. So sitting at number 4, Spider-Man Miles Morales.
I totally forgot about that title. I am an awful human being.
You are.
I still need to buy that game.
Yeah, I've now taken away the
I need to. Easy come, easy go. I totally forgot about that. I'm gonna have to make a purchase because that has been on my to buy list, you know what? There are a number of titles that I still need to acquire, but I'm glad that you brought that up. I have heard from other sources too that is in fact one of their favorite titles for 2020. So good on you for your number 4. Steve, what is your number 4?
Russ, number 4 comes with controversy.
Oh, I like me a little controversy, Steve.
I didn't feel like putting it higher. My number 4 pick was Cyberpunk.
Whoa, number 4 for Cyberpunk.
4. And if you remember,
Sizzle Pizzle.
That was my number 1 most anticipated title that I was hoping for this year. But it comes at number 4 because, yes, there are a lot of disappointments with it, especially where I'm at with the core Xbox One. But that being said, as we were speaking with Big Baby Moose the other day, if you can get past a lot of the disappointment, if you can not get like nauseated with like all the shuddering and the frame rates, and some people looking at you and speaking without their voices actually or their mouths actually moving with their voice or whatever. I mean, there is a immensely substantial game there with I mean, I'm going to be once all the problems are fixed, I'm going to be spending a lot of time there. And I feel like, I mean, the game should not have been released until next year, but since it has been released this year, and you can tell, like, okay, once everything's good, once it's good to go, this game is going to be superior in every way. And I can see that from where I'm at now, and I am definitely drawn back. I love the environment, I love the story, I love how they treat me like an adult, and not, just like a bunch of flashbang boom stuff to get my attention. I mean, there's so much to like about it, that it does, on the scale of like to dislike, pro to con, the pros definitely outweigh the cons. The cons are just definitely noticeable. So I really like playing it. I'm gonna try not playing it until they have everything fixed, or at least so I can enjoy it at the most possible that I can. But and that's the thing. And that's why I think it's important. In number 4 is that I cannot get away from my thoughts of I want to jump back in. I want to put other games on hold. But I can't. It can't be higher on the list with that same regard because there's so many faults to it. So anyhow, Cyberpunk. Numero cuatro. Yeah, I was curious if the game was going to make it on your list or not, just because you have been playing it on the base Xbox One console. You're not even on the Xbox One X, and so you've had a very different experience in that regard. But hey, it still broke through the top 5 for you. It did.
For me, the number 4 pick was Final Fantasy VII Remake. This is something that I feel like Steve can be a proud papa of sorts when it comes to me, because I never played the original Final Fantasy VII. I watched you play Final Fantasy VII on the PS1 back in the day, back in the 90s. And I was very enthralled with what was going on. I didn't, like I said, I didn't pick up the controller, but it was one of those games where I enjoyed sitting on the couch watching you do your thing. And so I feel as though with them making the remake, it was a calling, Steve. It was, I don't know, it was my destiny to sit down and give this game a whirl. And I'm glad that I did, even though it's not the complete game. It's just the kind of like the first third or quarter of the game. I don't even know in the grand scheme of things. I, for one, think that it is a testament to the solid gameplay mechanics that were created back in the day. Because with Square Enix and Capcom really leading the charge in this regard, where like they're exploring titles that were made 20, 30 years ago, and not just doing like a little facelift or whatever, but actually going through and really making some significant changes. I, for one, applaud that, because first of all, you have certain generations that have never played the OG version of these games, so they have no idea what they're missing. But second, I think that there's kind of, stigma is too strong of a word, but I feel as though when we finish a game and we put it on the shelf, we have nostalgic feelings about it when we look at it. We're like, oh, that was a good game, and it kind of ends right there. There's not like this compelling reason to revisit it. And so it kind of becomes a relic in our library or in the recesses of our cerebellum. So I think it's really cool with Final Fantasy VII to have a remake. I think that the art direction was absolutely fantastic. It was already really strong in the original title. That was something that I think helped put the PlayStation on the map. And for them to embrace the Unreal Engine, all of the characters look fantastic. All of the world and environments look just beautiful. The soundtrack itself, I think it's great to hear that dun, 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 and it just brought me right back to watching you play the game. I don't even know. I mean, you're more of the big Final Fantasy fan, Steve. Is that theme song in every single Final Fantasy title?
Basically, yes.
It's kind of like, oh, you won the battle kind of sound.
Yeah. Oh, you did not die this time.
It was great to hear the orchestral arrangement for it, which I thought was, again, really terrific. The updated combat system actually works, in my opinion. I think that, back in the day, they had this very traditional turn-based combat where like you would select what each of your characters in your party would do, and then you'd watch the AI do something to you, and it's just this kind of taking turns back and forth, whereas this was much more real-time action RPG-ish. And especially when I got used to some of the formulas as to how you could do combos using the character's skills or magic or whatever it is, there was a big appreciation on my side as to how they got this whole thing to work. So it definitely makes me look forward to what the sequel will entail. I hope that we don't have to wait too long, because I think that's another quality about the titles, that by the time I was done, it wasn't like, oh, thank God it's over, I can go on to something else. It's like, oh man, like I don't want this to end. I'm at a point now where I want to see what comes next. And so I feel as though I'm finally able to understand what you have been enjoying for a long time, Steve.
Awesome.
And Bradley too. Brad, you were playing the original Final Fantasies back in the day too, right?
Oh yeah, I've played ever since Final Fantasy 1 on the NES. I remember playing that at my grandmother's house when I was a wee lad.
I'm just a late bloomer.
You are, in so many ways, Russ. In so many ways. No, I agree with you. I considered the Final Fantasy VII remake for my list. It didn't quite make the top 5 cut, but I thought it was fantastic. Little bloated in parts, I will say. There were a couple sections of that game that were like, all right, y'all are just trying to pad this, aren't you? No, I thought it was great how they used essentially the combat system from Final Fantasy 15 and kind of tied it all in together with the remake there, and some of the liberties that they took with the original story. Having played the original back on the PlayStation, there were certain story beats I expected, and frankly, they didn't happen in the remake, and it really makes me curious where they're going to go with the long-term story of the remake. So there's characters who are alive that should be dead, and certain characters who were introduced earlier than they were in the original. I mean, there's a lot of different pieces that really make this almost a fresh game from the ground up, which is great. So, again, I approve of your number 4, Russ. I think you did a great job.
Oh, thank you. Number 3, Bradley, take us away.
So number 3, and I'm going to throw this out there because I've really struggled. My top 3 games for the year, depending on the way the wind is blowing. Any one of these 3 has been my number 1, and any one of these 3 has been my number 3. But damn it, I have to make a decision at some point in time. So my number 3, I've got to own it. So I'm owning number 3, which is the first game I played on my Xbox Series X, Assassin's Creed Valhalla. So that is the game I am elbow deep in right now. I'm about 70 hours into the game over the last month or so, and I am absolutely loving it. I have loved all of the new breed Assassin's Creed games, from Origin to Odyssey to now Valhalla. The Vikings are my people. I've got, my background is Norwegian. So seeing these stories, hearing about these mythologies and everything they're working in, man, I am absolutely adoring this game. I finished the main story yesterday, and now I'm kind of in the post-main story stuff. There's a ton of content here. So I absolutely love Eivor as a character. They take some twists in the story if you've been playing the Assassin's Creed since the beginning, some callbacks to some of the original characters, and it ends frankly on a twist that has me absolutely captivated to know where they're going to go next with the Assassin's Creed mythology. So Valhalla came in as my number 3.
Now, when you look, I know I've asked you this before, and I'm just curious to know now if you have changed a bit. When you look at Assassin's Creed Valhalla versus Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which I believe was the previous title in the series, which one do you like better?
Ooh. So that's hard to say. I ended up putting about 140 hours into Odyssey. That was my belated game of the year last year, if you remember right. I kind of cheated. It came out in 2018, but it came out at the end of the year, right at the same time as Red Dead. Red Dead took priority, so I ended up not playing Odyssey until after the first of the following year. But Man, that is tough. I have to see how all the pieces come together before I can honestly answer that question. Some of the things I loved about Odyssey, there are just some absolutely insane moments in Odyssey. You end up going to Atlantis and you get a staff that grants immortal life, and it goes so off the rails, fun, crazy. So I'm curious to see as I finish out some of this end game stuff, as they add in some of the post game or post launch DLC, where Valhalla lands. As far as the characters go, I love Eivor, as I mentioned. I'd probably take her over Cassandra, who was the main character I used in Odyssey. But I love the Norse mythology as well. So, balancing the Norse versus the Greek mythology. I mean, that's a tough question, Russ. I don't have an answer, so I'm just going to keep rambling. I'm going to stop rambling, and I'm going to turn it over to Steve. Steve, what's your number 3?
Can you believe I have had Odyssey for the longest time? I've only started to play it like 5 minutes, and then other stuff was out, and the show had to move on, and we were playing other games, and so I've yet to even move past like 5 minutes of it. But it might be a good thing because I heard a lot of folks say, yeah, if you just got the Xbox One, you're not really going to see all the visual splendor of the game. Like, you have to really get a better system. And so I guess I really tucked that back in my cerebellum, thinking, I'll just play it when the next system comes out, or whatever I get, and I can enjoy it that much more. So it is still pretty much brand spanking at my house.
Go ahead, Russ.
Oh, I was going to ask you, Brad, do you know if that title is part of the, I don't know how they're calling it, but basically, like, if you could get like an Xbox Series X, will it improve the visuals of Assassin's Creed Odyssey?
I don't know if Odyssey is, but I mean, absolutely Valhalla is. At this point, I'd probably just jump in on Valhalla. That's the newer one, jump in and play it. But it's just, and Steve, it's funny hearing you say that after you talked about Cyberpunk, which of all games appears to be totally broken on the on the OG console. So yeah, I would play. I think they're both great. I would absolutely spend time with them. I think they look better. I always thought that Odyssey looked better than Red Dead 2. I mean, that's as I played through it, I truly felt that. So I think they're gorgeous games, and Steve, time to get a new console. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, probably closer to my, maybe next month. Maybe I would say I have to get it on my birthday. It have to be my birthday gift to me for the next console.
Well, your birthday is in February, so that's not too far away.
Not too far away. Well, no one's got them right now anyhow, so.
Yeah, they're all sold out.
So I'm not even going to stress so much. My number 3, though, Russ. We've already talked about it once, but I have more liking for it than you did, apparently. I have my number 3 as Ori.
Oh, did you ever beat Ori and the Will of the Wisps?
I have not. I take my time, and I enjoy the game.
Apparently.
And I don't want to rush through it. I want to look at everything. Plus, I had other stuff I had to do. But beside the point. Anyhow, it made number 3 because, I really did not find fault with the game. And yes, it's a side scroller, but I thought, man, I really feel like this one game made me feel different than not just all the games I've played this year, but for many years past, where it really seems like the games are going towards, okay, you got a gun and you're in a post-apocalyptic time, and you got to take out the zombies or take out the baddies or take out this person, just gun shoot stuff. And it's almost seeming like I don't feel, it's really hard actually to get unplugged from life and then, plug in somewhere else where I just want to be completely like enveloped in like this atmosphere. And looking at Ori, everything was just so beautiful and peaceful. And I didn't feel, totally adrenaline pumped when I was trying to play the game. And that's what happens a lot when I play games, and I play games a lot at night. And then the problem is trying to settle down to go to sleep because I keep on thinking about the game and how intense it was. And Ori was, I guess it was a little bit intense that time, but the rest of the part was just absolutely beautiful to look at wherever I was in the game. And it didn't really matter that I had to go kind of back and forth, like, oh, I got this new ability, or I unlocked this other place here, and so I have to traverse all the way across the map or whatever, even though they had some fast travel points. But it was just beautiful wherever you looked at. And sometimes I just kind of kept the game on because some of the music that was played was also peaceful, and I had it kind of resonating in the house. My wife loved watching me play it. She liked I'm playing it a little bit. All the games aren't really her thing, but I haven't beat it, but because of the fact that I felt completely different playing this game than a vast majority of other games, and it was so pleasant and peaceful. I keep on going back to that. That's why it made number 3. The music, the visuals, the playability. I mean, I really fell in love with it. But I will say a disclaimer. I hadn't played the Blind Forest before, so this is my first Ori experience.
Oh, I thought you did.
No, I did not. So, I mean, maybe if I had played that one and then jumped into this one, maybe it wouldn't not rank as high. But this is my first experience with this type of game, and I just loved it from end to end.
Awesome. I'm impressed, Steve. I'm impressed.
Thank you, Russ.
Very nice. So my number 3 is Legends of Runeterra.
Oh.
I had a little bit difficulty placing this particular title just simply because it has been one of my most played games of 2020. The thing that, and Steve, I know you touched a little bit on this. I'm going to touch on a little bit further. I'm going to fondle this a little bit more.
Don't touch it too
if you
much.
Don't mind. Might fall off. When it comes to this, so CCG or collective card games have been around for a long time, but it's a genre that I never had gotten into. It just looked too complex. It didn't grab me with other, like, I know I have friends who play like Magic the Gathering, for example, and that's a hugely successful CCG. But for me, I just, for whatever reason, couldn't get into it. And I tried getting into it with some of the other ones. I know like Blizzard had its Hearthstone, and it still didn't connect with me fully. And it wasn't until Riot Games released Legends of Runeterra, I gave it a shot, and I was hooked immediately. And I think it just... There's something about the secret sauce of when you make a game, and lots of gaming developers will tell you this. It's hard to actually describe, but like when you're able to nail the formula in such a way that it makes people just want to just continue to play the game. It's just a fun game. And this game by itself, I would even go so far as to say it's probably more within the casual games category. But I absolutely love playing this game. I still play it to this day. I think the production values are one of the recipe ingredients that make it so successful, in the sense that it's right up my alley. I love the showmanship of everything. I love how much character and personality are within the cards. So when you draw a card, you hear some sort of memorable VO that happens, or if you cause some sort of combo or magical thing to happen or whatever, there's just these really cinematic animations that take place, and it brings the card game to life. It's not just, oh, here are your cards, now play a card game. You can tell like they really explore the idea of what possibly goes through a gamer's mind, like when you plop down some awesome card, like, oh, what if we did this, or what would it look like if this was an actual battle kind of thing. So I for one really appreciated a lot of that. I also appreciate the fact that Riot has been very punctual with constant DLC, where they're adding new regions, they're adding new types of cards, new game modes, that sort of thing. And it has been my go-to game for my iPhone for the entire year. Like, just, if I'm, doesn't matter where I am, but if I'm just in the mood to just play something for 5 minutes and put it down, then pick it up later and play it for 5 minutes, put it down, whatever. It is a lot of fun. So that is my number 3. Bradley, what is your number 2 pick?
My number 2 pick was my surprise of the year. It was a a game that wasn't even on my radar. It was just something that came out of nowhere. It was not even a full price title, and that was Hades for the and I played it on the Switch. So I absolutely fell in love with this game as soon as I started playing it. I saw some folks online talking about it and figured, hey, why not? Let's give it a shot. I've recommended it to a few people, Russ, and I don't think that any of them have actually played it.
It's on my to-buy list right next to Spider-Man Miles Morales.
There you go. So this is it's a rogue-like game, and basically you are the son of Hades, and you're trying to escape from Hades to go find your mom. I mean, that is the story of the game. The characters are fantastic. The voice acting is fantastic. It's very, very well-written, tongue-in-cheek. I mean, they make fun of you every time you die. And basically, you go on a run. Every run has a different build. So you pick your weapon. As you come across different rooms, you get different boons, kind of improvements to your skill level. And you end up with just this perfect build. And you're like, man, I'm going. And then you'll hit a wall, or you'll hit an enemy, or a boss battle that you just completely get your butt kicked. Then you start all the way back at the beginning. But every time you go, you make it a little bit further. You get a little bit stronger. And the story plays so well. So great action, great story, great characters. I mean, this as I'm sitting here talking about it at number 2, I'm almost kicking myself going, why wasn't it your number 1, Brad? Come on. I mean, it really was a very difficult choice for me between this and what I landed on at number 1. But I would strongly recommend Hades to anybody who actually likes video games. It is an absolute blast and worth every moment that you're playing it. So fantastic game. Again, cannot recommend it highly enough.
I do have a question for you. I may have asked you this already in the past, so I apologize. My brain is not what it once was. When it comes to Hades, would you say that the game is similar to Dead Cell?
Dead Cells? I only in that it's a roguelite, excuse me. So, but no, not really. Yes, no, not really. No. Because no, not really. I mean, similar but different, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Again, I'm rambling. You have me rambling again. So
did I ask you that already in the past or not?
I don't know. Maybe. We talk so much. Who remembers? But no, I mean, it's got some similarities, but it's a very different game. Dead Cells is a side scroller. This is more of a Diablo style 3/4 view. They're similar in that they're roguelites, and they're similar in that they're action games. But again, very, very different. Dead Cells doesn't have much of a story. This one is very story driven. Dead Cells is more about the weapons that you find. This is more about the boons and power-ups. I mean, just very different, but some similarities.
Okay. Right on.
Yeah, but no, definitely worth playing. I, again, cannot recommend it enough. So, all right. Steve, what do you have at number 2?
Number 2, we have already spoken about.
But I
ranked it a little bit higher, which is FF7, Russ.
I had a
Fantasy 7 remake.
To be honest, I wasn't sure if that game was going to be your number 1 or number 2. I knew it was going to be high though.
So, when I first played this on PlayStation, it changed my world. And the game was so long, but it was awesome from start to finish. But because it was so long, I think I had. You remember those memory cards for the PlayStation that you could buy that you would stick in there, and they were basically just like game save cards. That's basically what they were. Well, I filled up one of those little memory cards
SMU or MU. They used to be called like MU or SMU or
something like that. Yeah, but that was basically what they were. It was little memory cards. They allowed you to save a bunch of games.
You could put like stickers on them, right?
They gave you
indentation in there.
Yeah. So you can kind of like, okay, I got all these that are kind of off-white. What game is what? Let's put all 6 in there and see what happens. So I had like a ton of just different game saves on one card because I loved starting the game over from certain points, but I couldn't just get myself to completely start the game over. I could do all like the extra content with the big spells that you were able to find. I maxed out on my characters, and I have like, I don't even know how many. The clock stopped at 99 hours, at 99.99 hours, and who knows how much time I even have in that game. And I had, if anybody has been listening to the show, I have been saying like, look, there are some really fantastic games that are old that need to be redone and relived and replayed with today's technology, because they would be absolutely spectacular, blow the roof off, awesome. And so when Square said they were making Final Fantasy VII again, I mean, I couldn't have a happier wish. Let's put it that way. I think I didn't rank it highest because, well, you'll know with my number one, but also too, I really felt like, okay, at the beginning I had Final Fantasy in its entirety. Now I have partial Final Fantasy, it's 7, and we have to wait for all the rest of them to come out. So I mean, they're really, it's not a full Final Fantasy 7 from PlayStation 1. Final Fantasy in its entirety from PlayStation 4. You're getting these little parts, and that's kind of like, well, I can't really say it's the entire game. But yeah, it's really fun playing it all over again, seeing what the modern technology can do with the graphics. I mean, we can be surrounded in our environment. We don't have like the static one image that we kind of have to move this, very limited polygon character with spiky hair or ice cream cone hair, whatever you want to call it, all throughout this like one single picture. But man, it is definitely good. I mean, and they did do a very good job with Cloud. Yeah, some part of it, now that we know what Cloud's actual like tone is in his voice and stuff, like you're like, I kind of liked how I thought he sounded before, in my own imagination sort of thing. But that doesn't take away much from the game. And yeah, I have not beat it yet, but everything that I've seen so far with the spells and the new attack system and, a very smooth frame rate and all the colors and the enemies, and I mean, I do feel like I am reliving that experience over again that I've been waiting for such a long time. And so, thank you very much to Squaresoft, or Square Enix.
There you go.
I should say.
Very nice, Steve. Thank you for that. My number 2, Ghost of Tsushima.
Oh.
Ghost of Tsushima. So, you guys know, it's no secret that I have always been a fan of more of the ninja-esque / pun intended, samurai oriented action adventure titles. I've always loved them since the 8-bit days, and it is no exception in this instance. In fact, last year, my number 1 pick was Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice, which was absolutely fantastic. I've never had a more intense experience in terms of game difficulty than that game. And this one was hard because I was kind of going back and forth with whether or not this was going to be my number 1 pick, but it ended up being number 2 for me. The open world action adventure set in ancient feudal Japan is, it makes me so excited. I have always had a fascination with that time period. And I am so happy that this whole vision by Sucker Punch Studios is fully realized. The combat mechanics, the idea of a standoff, which I can't recall another game introducing this particular type of gameplay mechanic. I use that all the time, it was refreshing for me because typically when I play a lot of the older ninja games, more often than not, I try to go for more of a stealthy approach. And if I got caught or whatever, then I would go and I would attack and so on and so forth. But in this instance, it was an amazing feeling. The sensation of you walking up like a badass to like the front gates of some sort of stronghold and calling the enemies out. I've never seen that before. And it was a very empowering feeling, I must say, when it comes to gaming. You're there and And then, of course, you have kind of the who's going to flinch first kind of a moment. And then hopefully if you don't give in to some of the fakes or the psych outs that the enemy does, you are rewarded. There is this payoff where then, especially if you upgrade the payoff, you can take out in slow motion and cinematic flair, like I think 4 or 5 opponents just swing, swing, swing. I mean, it was very rewarding in that regard. But then again, it wasn't limited to just having standoffs. You know, you have multiple skill trees that are open-ended in terms of which ones you want to upgrade at what points of the game, and you don't even have to upgrade them in order to progress if you don't want to, or you can really, just work your way through earning enough to be able to have the experience to upgrade your skills. And what I thought was cool was that each skill set was a different type of sword play. That's what I thought was very cool about the notion where, depending on if you were fighting an enemy that had a shield versus a larger Goliath-styled enemy versus an enemy that had a spear, so on and so forth, it was really great that they had the thoughtfulness where, in order to really kind of stand head and shoulders in terms of an advantage over certain enemy types, you would in real time switch up your sword style, and I don't know, it made for a very fresh encounter every single time. Now, I mentioned stealth earlier, and stealth still plays a role in this game where they do not penalize you if you decide you want to be more passive and take more of a stealthy approach. I did that in certain instances, and in some side quests, that is kind of the goal, right? Like, it's like, okay, I get that. But I think it was really cool. Another aspect of this game that I really like is the thoughtfulness toward the culture. Having the ability to do simple things like bowing toward citizens, right? Or you're at a graveyard site and you bow to a tombstone. Not only does it have the animation, but there's also things that are reciprocated in turn, where if I bow toward a citizen, the citizen will bow back toward me. If I bow toward someone who was slain and someone sees that, they comment on the fact that I'm showing respect for the fallen. Just little touches like that I find to be very cool, and it's becoming more standardized, which makes me excited because it shows how important it is that you go farther in there. The idea of the haiku, where you're exploring and discovering different parts of this open world, and you come across places where you sit down and you actually get to put together a haiku based on where you are in the hero's journey and what the surroundings look like and stuff. The fact that you have the option to play the entire game where all the characters speak Japanese and you have to read the English subtitles as opposed to all the characters having English. Those components really push the game toward an authentic Japanese experience, and it makes me look forward to other instances that perhaps can take place in other parts of the world with their own languages, their own customs, their own traditions, because then you not only do you get to learn about how they live their lives as a community, but you also get to feel as though you are now part of that community, which I mean to me is an important aspect of gaming overall. The art direction is a no-brainer. I think we can all say that when we were playing this game, the colors, I have never seen more vibrant colors in a game before than in Ghost of Tsushima. I think it is amazing what they were able to create, not only with the foliage and the leaves on the trees, the time of day and night, the weather, really, really, really cool stuff. The soundtrack was just beautiful. Really, really beautiful music in the whole thing. Even the idea that you have your own flute, and you can play it as you're riding on horseback, or if say for instance you want to change the weather pattern itself. There's kind of a little mythical component to the flute playing, where if it's lightning storms and rain, you play your flute and suddenly the rain stops, and then you have this peaceful kind of slightly breezy sunny day. I think a lot of that stuff is very methodical in terms of what the team was trying to accomplish with it. So I will say, if I had to critique it a little bit, I didn't think that there were certain areas that went far enough that I think were more present in games like Red Dead Redemption 2, where you had more of a relationship with your horse. you had to actually take naps or feed yourself, doing little kind of like day-to-day things that people in real life have to do to survive. I think that would have been really cool if they would have done this in Ghost of Tsushima, but that just means that it's an opportunity for them to implement that for the sequel. And one of these days, I'm gonna conclude with this. Steve will at some point finish the game, and then we'll have to have you back on, Bradley, and then we can all three discuss the ending of the game.
Yeah, my feelings on the ending of that game, Russ. I agree with everything you just said. What I thought was interesting is you never once mentioned story as one of the things you loved about that game. You did. Hold on. So my issue with that game is the ending, and I'm going to leave it at that. That left me so disappointed in the 45 hours that I put into that game, because they had such a moment, such a setup for a huge iconic moment, and they took the video game route. And man, I agree with everything you just said. I feel like the story is what pushed that game off my list, especially with where it ends. But anyway, so there you go. There's my 2 cents. I would love to dig in and go spoiler cast on that and talk about that ending if Steve ever finishes the game.
Hopefully, maybe by his birthday. You never know. We'll have to see what happens. He's getting close, though. We have now entered the number 1 favorite game of 2020 for each of us. Bradley, would you be so kind as to tell us, what is your number 1 pick?
Oh, I have to ask before I put it out there. Does anybody have a guess what my number 1 pick is going to be?
Oh, that's a good question.
Tetris 2020.
Actually, you know what? Tetris on the Xbox Series X is freaking amazing. So that Tetris Effects game is totally worth it. But no, that's not my number 1 game.
Man, it's difficult because you have already listed certain titles that I thought were in the running for your number 1 pick.
Ah, okay. So then I'll just jump in. I landed number 1 on what was probably my most anticipated game of the year. And even though it took some turns, it took some twists from where I expected it to go, The Last of Us Part 2 is going to be my number 1 favorite game of the year. I loved the original Last of Us. That's one of the few games, again, that I've played through multiple times, played through it, then played through it again. When the remake came through, I thought Ellie and Joel's story from the first game was great. The idea of playing a future Ellie, Joel a little bit older, really excited me about The Last of Us 2, and Naughty Dog obviously is, if not the premier studio, one of the premier studios when it comes to cinematic action adventure games. So I absolutely adored The Last of Us Part 2. I'm going to get into some minor spoilers as we go here. The game's been out for 9 months, so if you haven't played it, I'm not going to go too deep on plot things, but one of the things The Last of Us Part 2 did that totally shocked me was you end up playing almost half the game as a character other than Ellie. You end up playing as Abby, whose father was the doctor that was murdered by Joel at the end of the first game. And so it really, to me, does a masterful job. First of all, the game is beautiful. The characters are perfectly acted. But, playing the game from 2 sides of the coin, right? So you play the first half of the game. There's a sprinkling here and there of Abby. Play the first half of the game as Ellie. You get up to a point, and then all of a sudden it flips the script, and you play about 40% of the game as Abby before it goes back to Ellie. And getting to see the other character's perspective, getting to see the perspective of the antagonist as opposed to the protagonist, I found myself, and our friend Chris, who, Russ, he played it as well.
Good old Mr. Pelfrey.
Good old Mr. Pelfrey. We both found ourselves being Team Abby at the end of the game, which was shocking. I'd already fallen in love with Ellie, but at the time I reached the end of the game, I wanted Abby to win. I wanted Abby to have the quote-unquote happy ending. as much as this world has happy endings. And that to me was one of the video game moments where I'm like, wow, how did they do that? How did they tell a story that literally turned me on a character I had spent so much time with and fallen in love with? And it was, man, the action in that game is good. The story is fantastic. I am so excited to see what they do with The Last of Us as they make a TV show for HBO. Knowing that the folks who are in charge of that have some pedigree with Chernobyl and, some of the other shows that they've made and written. Because I think the story in The Last of Us, it takes some twists, it takes some turns, but I absolutely adored The Last of Us Part 2. Obviously, it was fairly controversial when it came out. A lot of people weren't happy about the fact that their beloved character was, suddenly looked at as the antagonist by somebody else, seeing it from their perspective. That I will go back at some point and replay that game because The Last of Us Part 2 is simply a masterpiece. So it ended up at my number 1 spot.
I totally forgot about that game and you playing it.
Which is amazing because it was one of the biggest games of the year. I mean, the Video Game Awards just gave it I think it won best pretty much everything at the Video Game Awards. But
right.
Yeah, and I honestly, well-deserved. I cannot wait to see what Naughty Dog does next. We'll see. We'll see if they go back to the world of Last of Us or they go in a different direction.
Last of Us Part 2, representation by Bradley. Steve, what is your number 1?
Well, it should come to no surprise, Russ.
Actually, you know what's really funny is I told Brad I didn't know his number 1. I have no idea what your number 1 is because you said Final Fantasy was number 2, and you've already said Cyberpunk. So I'm like,
You're kidding me, Russ. I've only been talking about it for weeks on end. Russ.
What?
Ghosts of Tsushima is my number 1.
Oh, right.
So this was actually my number 3 for the most anticipated 2020 titles. And I really didn't know. I mean, it looked great at E3, but I really didn't know how it was going to play because unlike you, I don't really care to have like these, ninja assassin type games where you have to be stealthy all the way through. Like, that's not really my bag, baby. That is more your bag with your initials and your stickers. And it smells like you. So that's not really my thing. And so when I started playing this, in the beginning, honestly, I didn't really care for it all that much, probably because I was dying all the time. But I keep going back to it, and it is, to me, the visuals are a treat. The music is a treat, and yeah, you guys didn't mention anything about the story, and yes, I have not beat it yet. But I like the story as far as I have all the way up till Act 3, I guess I should say, because that's where I'm at right at this point. I really do like the story. I like the push and pull of, like, do we honor more our culture or do we save our land from our people with any methods necessary? Because this is war. And are we going to, what good is honor if we're all dead at the end of the day and no one remembers us, And man, I really felt like, I was twitching the game a lot and I felt like, in a way, I wanted to share the beauty with everybody who might, tune into us without I wouldn't think that, okay, probably, millions upon millions upon millions of this game is actually sold and people are enjoying it in their own houses anyway. But I felt like the splendor of every angle of the game was just a masterpiece. Yeah, but it didn't have that level of, rocks. Yeah, what's the game? I can't even think of it now.
Which game?
Red Dead, actually. That's what I was
RDR2?
trying to think, like, Rockstar, what, GTA? No, that wasn't it.
Rockstar, energy drink? No. Game studio? Yes.
So it didn't have, like, that level, that little extra level of, like, you gotta take care of yourself, because if, when I'm twitching, I'm like, I just saved this person's life. Are they giving me something to eat? What exactly are they giving me as a gift for saving their life? I don't really know. But he doesn't eat, and he doesn't drink, and he doesn't sleep. And so, yeah, having played a game where, yeah, you should definitely take care of yourself, to a game where, yeah, that's not really a big deal. Yeah, I probably would have made it better, but it's definitely not taking anything away from the game. And if playing the game results to me pausing and observing and wanting to take pictures and post them on Twitter or whatnot, that to me just says something where like the aspect of me playing and enjoying game is just to stop and stand still and just look and wonder everything around me. And yeah, there was stuff that was put in there for drama, like there's just rose petals and leaves and like willows blowing everywhere. Like, I get it, I got it, but that just added to the splendor. And I was thinking the other day, a lot of the games that I have played with Japanese characters have been really kind of like that far into the personality. Like think of Hayachi Mishima. When he speaks, he's like real charismatic character, like all the time. And that's basically what I get when I play some of those games. And so just to be like in the culture under like a normal story, and maybe, I haven't done any kind of history digging. I don't know if it's accurate, inaccurate. Maybe they just made it up. I don't know. I'm just being forthcoming with it. But anyhow, just to hear like the Japanese dialogue, and it took away from me looking at the screen and the center and just looking at the bottom of my screen just to read all the subtitles. But I loved everybody speaking in Japanese as if they were, that's how they speak. No one speaks like Hayachi Mishima all the time. Give me a break. So, I just really, really did like it. I thought that, maybe if this was a PS5 title, what could they have done more? Like with the water and the waves and the weather effects and maybe putting more, detail on the armor. But, they had so much different, like, variations of the armor and, like, the helmets and like the shoulder armor and the swords and the bow and arrow. And man, I just really wanted to continue more and more. And I'm in Act 3. I'm about to, end it. And I know there's some DLC and some other stuff you can do, but man, I definitely want more. And that's the game I kept coming back to. And that's the game I thought about most. That's the game I kept on talking to you about most, Russ. If you pay attention.
Well, we have talked over this past year quite a bit on a number of titles.
We have.
But yeah, no, Ghost of Tsushima was one that we have talked about quite a bit. And actually, I'm glad that you brought up the armor and the weapons, because that was something that I didn't mention when I was talking about it as my number 2. The part of the culture aspect of the game, and especially when it comes to a culture as old as the Japanese, you have, and this is not exclusive to the Japanese, you have other ancient cultures that did the exact same thing. But in this instance, I loved how much beauty was placed in every article of clothing, every part of the armor, every bow and arrow, like you said, every sword. It was amazing. I spent time where I was just in awe within the character customization screen, looking at every set of armor, but then also you could like swap out, you can mix and match if you wanted to. That was a very comprehensive approach to something that, man, it's the word authenticity comes to mind when I look at that, because it's not like some sort of fantastical, we're going to make up stuff as we go along. And there's merit to that in its own right. But when it comes to a culture as well known as Japan, as the Japanese, you have to make sure that you do your homework. You cannot just freewheel that. You need to make sure that you have. I'm sure probably Sucker Punch had consultants who are from Japan who help them with those different areas. I'd be willing to bet money on that. Because as I was going through all that, it's like, man, this really does look like this is legit. This is not something where people just for the sake of the, wanting it to look quote unquote cool, they did so. Everything was very methodical. So I'm glad you brought that up, Steve.
And I'll just end with just the ending, I guess, because, maybe I'll be sorely disappointed. From both of you guys talking about it, that might be a certain percentage of disappointment there. But from what I've experienced so far, I don't think that would prohibit me from starting a brand new game all over again, especially when I get a PS5. And that's one of my main compelling reasons to get a PS5 pre a lot of these next gen games, is mainly I want to see that game running as best as it possibly can, and I want the new Game Plus. I want to experience it knowing all that I know so far from the beginning, running the best it can run all the way up to the end. And maybe the ending, is like, okay, thanks for playing, goodbye. Press start for a new game.
Sure.
Sort of thing. Maybe it is that way, maybe it isn't that way. But since I've experienced everything and it's been wonderful up until this point, I know that if I started the game over, it'll still be just as wonderful, if not even more so, up until this point. So, anyhow, I meant to do some more digging before the show because I really wanted to see what their inspiration was. Like if there was some samurai movies that came out of Japan that were beautiful like this, or with a story just like this, I want to see them. Like after playing this game, I want to see those movies. And maybe that they didn't, but I wanted to do that, and I just that kind of slipped my mind before the show. But either way, I will go home and I will still play more Ghost of Tsushima. I will still play a lot of the games that I have here on the list, but I think that is the one where, yes, starting a new Game Plus all over again, man, I will do that before I'll do Cyberpunk. And that's why it makes my number one.
Bradley, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to say that Ghost of Tsushima, it shocks me that this was created by a Western studio, not a Japanese studio. There were even some comments along the way that, some of the Japanese studios were like, okay, what are we missing that we don't even capture the Japanese culture as strongly as this Western studio did? And I was listening to another podcast. And,
what?
I know, how dare I? I'm sorry. And, the guy's wife is Japanese, and she watched him play it, and she was like, oh my God. This is, there was one or two little things that she picked up on, but for the most part, she was like, wow, she was shocked when it wasn't, when she found out it wasn't a Japanese studio that created it. So yeah, they nailed the aesthetic, they nailed the culture. Steve, it sounds like you need to go watch some Kurosawa films if you're looking for, some good Japanese films there, but, because I think that's a lot of the inspiration, but, great game. Again, I just disappointed in some little bits at the end, but we'll talk about that later.
Indeed.
So, Russ, what's your number one? I'm dying. I'm bated breath.
So, my number one pick is a bit of a controversial one as well. But no, my number one pick, I was going back and forth with trying to figure out what it was I was going to have for this slot. And it did switch places a couple of times. I have decided to go with Cyberpunk 2077 for the PC.
Knew it!
And I think that there are several things about this that are interesting to me. First of all, it's like a tale of two stories, right? The PC version and the console version. So like if you were to go to a place like IGN, they gave the PC version of the game a 9 out of 10. If you look at the console version of the review, they gave it a 4 out of 10. And I think that really tells a story, because in my mind, when I first pre-ordered this game, I pre-ordered it for the Xbox because at the time I was expecting to play it on the Xbox One. And it then got a series of delays. And then when the game was released, it was quickly discovered that this game actually runs better on the Xbox Series X and PS5 as opposed to the PS4 and the Xbox One. But not only that, the idealized, optimized version of this game was on PC. But it doesn't stop there either, because the game itself was riddled with bugs, and I have experienced my own number of bugs playing the game. So it's interesting to me, like how crazy of a launch this game has had. At the same time that you had all that going on, you had them making 8 million, I think it was like 8 million copies of the game was already pre-ordered when the game was about to come out. And we heard about how they offered a refund, and we've talked about that on this program, about how there are some frictions going on where like Sony straight up took it off of their PlayStation Store. And so there's a lot of that going on. But despite even that going on, the number has now been over 13 million copies has been sold since the game was released. So it's this incredibly turbulent past couple of weeks since the game was launched. And there's been a lot of chatter over how the game is and what's in there, what's not in there, that sort of thing. And so for me, I just want to have a disclaimer in that what I'm selecting as my favorite game of 2020 is the PC version, because I have played on both the Xbox Series X as well as the PC, and the PC does in fact have the best experience on the game. That's saying something, because even my PC cannot turn on every single visual setting that the game has to offer. Like ray tracing, for example, I do not have the option to turn that on. Yet it still looks amazing. And it makes me look forward to when they have a drop. That's supposed to happen next year, where they will in fact do like a graphics upgrade for the next consoles, like PS5, Xbox Series X. Because right now the version of the game that they're playing is for the base consoles of the PS4 and the Xbox One. It's not like you're getting the correct upgrade based on the hardware spec of the next systems. And I think they may even continue to do that as well on the PC version, in terms of making it a little more friendly and not so taxing on everything. This game could have easily spent another 6 months in development. I think that it's a classic example of what happens when you have developers who are really putting their all into a game, and then you have the executive side that is more concerned with the numbers and the bean counting and wanting to get it out before Christmas and all this other stuff. And so there's always that headbutting going on. Having said all that, I'm going to dive into why this was my pick. I have currently put in, I believe, over 60 hours into this game, and I'm not even halfway done yet. I'm nowhere close to being done. To give you an idea, I was telling Steve last night, the max level your character can get to is level 50. And my character right now is 16. And I'm taking my time with the game, of course, and I'm going through stuff, but there are so many side quests, so many gigs, so many components to the main story, and I'm having a lot of fun going through all of this. The city itself, and I've said this before, I'll say it again, is a character in this game. And that is not said lightly, because you don't have that type of experience in a game where the environment itself is a participant in your gameplay experience. It is amazing to me when I'm playing through and I'm just looking at the city and I'm constantly looking around like a tourist in this city and being in awe. I've already put 60 hours into the game. I haven't seen everything in the game yet. I haven't seen the entire Night City. There are still massive swaths that I haven't seen. And this isn't just like, oh, here's a bunch of outdoor hills and valleys and trees and, kind of organic stuff that you can create within a map editor. Like, this is methodically placed architecture. Like, you have your corporate sectors, your downtowns, your ghettos, your beaches. I mean, there's just all kinds of different areas that are... If I had to compare it to like GTA 5, GTA 5 was really good with this too. But I feel like Cyberpunk 2077 takes it to a whole new level. In terms of like the scope of the world being just massive. The decision component of the gameplay also is one of the things I absolutely love, because it carries weight. Every decision you make has a major impact on the story direction, and the sense of consequence is palpable all the time. And I don't want to spoil it, like giving you specific examples, but there are instances that I have discovered, watching like the 45-minute gameplay demo that CD Projekt Red dropped on E3. I came across some of those scenarios, and I decided to intentionally select something that was different than what was shown. And oh my goodness, like it very much changed up the dynamics of what was going on entirely. So it's not like they try and like have a facade of choice, and then regardless of what you choose, you still go down this linear path. It's very dynamic in that regard, which I think it's amazing because it immerses me more into the game. The art direction itself is completely on point because you're dealing with a futuristic city, and because it is a cyberpunk genre, which I'm a fan of. I've always been, in addition to my ninja games, I've always loved cyberpunk. It's very rare that a cyberpunk title gets dropped. And so when one like this does, it's like, wow, I hope it's really good. And it's a relief for me personally that I have had as much enjoyment as I had with this title. But when you look at the art direction, like it's really cool. It's like they take certain visual vibrancies from Back to the Future Part 2 when they're in the future, the 2015 of Robert Zemeckis. But it's not stopping just at the neon colors and the glows and stuff. There's also this sense of erosion that has taken place with the idea that, when you have a civilization or a city that continues to expand and grow, there are going to be parts of that city that unfortunately fall by the wayside, that cannot keep up with progress, that have their own little stories to tell, create their own little subcultures. And the city just has this in spades. The gameplay itself is also to be commended because it successfully executes a combination of it being a first-person shooter, an RPG, a racing game, and an adventure game. And when I think about another game that tried to do this, Destiny comes to mind, because if you recall, Bungie was really trying to tout their title as like, oh, we're trying to embrace all these different things into one. But the problem was that the final result of that game, it was kind of like this muddied, watered, like it didn't really excel at any one thing in particular. It did everything kind of broad stroke-ish. And I think that Bungie had the fan following from its Halo days to make that game a success. But having played Destiny 2, there's a lot about the game that does not hook me in. And maybe that's just a personal preference. I have no idea. But when it comes to a game like Cyberpunk, for me personally, they have actually found the secret sauce to successfully integrate a first-person shooter with an RPG, with a racing title, with an adventure title. That is huge because it becomes this completely idealized world that allows me to have such a unique gaming experience. And it's like I want to know what's around every corner of this world. And I have not discovered everything. There are a number of personalities that you come across with that build over time. It's like it's one of those games that rewards you the more you put into it. So like I've seen people complain, like on Reddit, for example, like, oh, I beat the game in 20 hours. Well, yeah, because they mainlined the main quest and got through it as fast as possible, but they didn't actually take the time to explore and discover all that the game has to offer. So yeah, of course you're going to have a 20-hour experience if you want to try and blast through it. The soundtrack fits really nicely. There's a nice variety. You can tell they took a cue from Rockstar Games in the sense of, GTA 5, when you're in your car, you can choose if you want to listen to hip hop versus rock versus classical or jazz, whatever it is. They do the same type of thing in this game. There is such a sense of ambition with this game, and I'm already pleased with how CD Projekt Red has within the last 2 weeks. They have had, I think, 4 different major patch updates through the game. So you can tell that they are doing everything they can to try and get the game stabilized and free of bugs as they can. And not only that, but they have already talked about how there's going to be a DLC drop, which is different than the patching and the bug fixes and stuff like that. Apparently, their first DLC drop is supposed to happen either next month or in February. So they're already getting their DLC packs on deck. It's not like we're going to have to wait 6 months to a year before the first DLC pack drops. And I think at the core of this, the core element of this game, you have a gameplay loop that is very sophisticated, that is very solid. And I think as we move forward and they're able to like I said, get through all of the things that quite honestly they should have been given another 6 months to iron out, I think that they're going to be able to build upon an already huge world and make things even more interactive, more engrossing. When I think of various games I've played over the year, there are certain titles that have hooked me that I find myself thinking about all day long that I cannot wait to jump back into again. And there are certain games like Legends of Runeterra that have that, or Ghost of Tsushima that has that. But Cyberpunk 2077, I'm here to tell you, this is the one where I am absolutely hooked. And like I said, if I am the Titanic that just crashed into the iceberg, I've only seen the tip of the iceberg for this game. There is a whole ton of game that I've yet to experience and see. Another aspect to this that I think is really interesting is the psychological component. And this is not really a spoiler at all, but the idea of Cyberpunk's world as it relates to the humans is you start out with a human character that does not really have any kind of cyborg implants whatsoever. Yet as you go through the game, there are certain scenarios, or perhaps you earn enough eddies to purchase various types of cyborg upgrades. But I find myself pausing when I'm at a fixer's lab, deciding whether or not I want to move forward with an operation, because of the fact that with every operation that I condone, I am sacrificing a part of who I am physically into more of a robotic cyborg entity. That to me, I find myself grinning as I'm stuck, because once again, there is such a sense of choice and what the consequence is of any given choice in this game, that even something as deceptively simple as being somewhere where like, hey, I like the ability to really jump, instead of like jumping a height that a human can, I want to be able to jump up onto a rooftop. Oh, but wait, that means that like I'm going to become basically an amputee. Like they're going to have to chop off the lower half of my or upper half of my legs in order to have that kind of power. Well, wait a minute. I don't know if I want to sacrifice my body to have that ability. That's just one example of some of the consequences that are in there, that as I think it was almost a byproduct of it. But I find myself being in conflict as to like, do I want to remain as human as I can possibly be with this particular life path that I've chosen? Or do I want to embrace this idea of technology and be like this character that's capable of all these amazing feats? But yet at the end of the day, if someone were to ask me, are you human? It then begs the question, what is it to be human? And again, these are very cerebral, psychological byproducts of the game that makes me gleeful, because it's not like a simple shoot 'em up game. There are a lot of things in there that sneak up on you. And I mean, again, I have not beaten the game. There's a lot that I still have to experience. And there are things about it that need to be more fleshed out and that sort of thing. But it's amazing what CD Projekt Red has been able to accomplish with this. And it does make me very excited to see what's in store for 2021, because I'm going to be playing this game, I think, for a very long time. And once I'm done with it, it will be a game that I will forever be grateful towards in terms of my gaming experience. So I will stop it right there, because I could talk about this game for hours.
I cannot wait to play this game when it actually comes out, Russ.
And I think, it's one of those things too, where like I've discussed it with Steve, and I was saying how on the one hand, it's like there's so much hype around the game and people want to play it. But if you are only playing it on like a base console system, it's almost like you're doing yourself a disservice, because while you do get to experience what the story has and whatnot, it is clearly not optimized. And I just hate for people to have that be their first experience with Cyberpunk. I would almost recommend waiting like 6 months or something and then playing the game.
Yeah, that's my plan. So,
I
want to wait till the next gen version of the game is actually out.
I think you're wise. I think it's very wise of you to do that. I do think, looking at the number of titles that I have played over this past year, Ori and the Will of the Wisps, Resident Evil 3, Legends of Runeterra, Streets of Rage 4, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Ghost of Tsushima, Animal Crossing New Horizons, Marvel's Avengers, Star Wars Squadron, Cyberpunk 2077, Astro's Playroom, Spiritfarer. There have been, I would say, a healthy variety of titles that have come out despite COVID-19. Would you agree to that, Bradley?
Oh, absolutely. I think, and it was a weird year, right? We knew it. We knew it going into 2020, even outside of COVID. This was a transitional year for consoles, right? So anytime you get into that last year of a console generation, it's going to be a lighter year than any other year. There were still some great games, and there were some surprises. You mentioned Spiritfarer. That's one I've heard great things about and definitely want to spend some time with. Hades, that I mentioned, again, came out of nowhere. I think there's a number of games out there that made the year fantastic. So another good year for video games, I would agree.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank Bradley for joining us again. Hopefully we can turn this into a tradition every year. I think that we can stop it here and wrap up this particular episode of Joygasm. Make sure you tune in next week. Thanks for hanging out with us. If you enjoyed this episode, we invite you to check out patreon.com/Joygasm, which is spelled Joygasm, and consider becoming a monthly contributor. You'll get exclusive perks and early access to the show, not to mention it really helps us continue doing what we love to do. Also, you can follow us on social media and YouTube. Just do a search for Joygasm TV. Last but not least, search Joygasm TV on Twitch to see us stream our gaming adventures live every Wednesday night at 9:30 p.m. Central Time. We will see you all next week.